Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. There's still quite a few people to log on, I believe, but um, let's go ahead and start. Monday session, we didn't have too many people attend Monday session, so I want to just highlight that you might want to go back and view that. In that session, I discussed if a property is in Bright MLS, it is not a FSBO. We had a situation with the net commissions and all this other stuff, and it was being treated as a FSBO. If it is in Bright, it is not a FSBO. There is an agent on the other side. So we discussed two different ways of being able to put a listing into the computer and deal directly with the owner. Does not make it a FSBO. So there is a couple different forms that you can use to be able to put a listing in the computer that way. We also talked about the difference between a net listing, which is illegal in Virginia, and the commission being based on net sales price. Okay, there's a difference. A net listing is simply, I want this much, whatever you get above that, you keep. That is illegal in Virginia, but net sales price can mean different things to different people. To most real estate agents, that means any concessions given by the owner, like $10,000 in closing cost, then the commission would be based on the net price. And that's why when you look at your sales contract, it has in paragraph 2, where it says seller concessions, it says less, so people get an idea of what the net would be. We also talked about earnest money deposits and things that DPOR has a problem with, and DPOR is very strict about earnest money deposits. So you might want to go back and pick up that session if you missed it. Today we're going to start with paragraph 21 of your sales contract, page 8 of 13 of your contract. We're going to talk about the notice of possible filing of mechanics liens. So what in the world is a mechanics lien? If someone does work on your property, labor, or they furnish materials, and they do not get paid, they have the right to file a mechanics lien in Virginia to ensure they get paid. The problem here, and we're going to read the paragraph, but the problem here for your buyer, if there was extensive work done, I mean, you guys did a home inspection and there was $40,000 worth of items to be done, and that's not unheard of in an expensive sale. And they had contractors come in, which it calls for in the contract. If those contractors were not paid and your buyer goes to settlement, they may end up finding a lien against their property after settlement that wouldn't have been found prior, which they will be responsible for because the lien runs with the property, not the person that caused it. So let's take a look at this paragraph, and hopefully you won't just gloss over this with your buyer. You might want to make sure they understand. So the Code of Virginia permits persons who have performed labor or furnished materials for the construction, removal, repair, or improvement of any building or structure to file a lien against the property. This lien must be filed at any time after the work is commenced or the material is furnished, but not later than earlier of 90 days from the last day of the month in which the liener last performed work or furnished materials, or 90 days from the time the construction, removal, repair, or improvement is terminated. So 90 days from the last day of the month. So if they did the work on the 5th day of a month, then they have the rest of that month plus 3 more months to file the lien. Okay. Most settlements take place within 30 to 45 days. So if work was done on the property and that person was not paid, this could pop up later. Now in Virginia, they have that time to file. Then then they have to take an action to enforce the mechanic's lien. Must be initiated within 6 months from the date recorded. So if your buyer is in the property for more than 10 months and there's been no lien filed, then they're home free. Okay. So once that lien is filed, they have 6 months to perfect it. Okay. So just be aware that this can pop up. Okay. An effective lien for work performed prior to the date of the settlement may be filed after settlement. Legal counsel should be consulted. They put it in, large letters so that we all remember to cover that. Now I want you to go to paragraph 29G, okay? Because there's different types of title insurance people can purchase, okay? You can purchase standard, or you can purchase what we call the Eagle policy, the enhanced. So if you look at paragraph 29G on page 10 of 13 of your sales contract, it's right at the bottom. Title insurance. Buyer may, at buyer's expense, purchase owner's title insurance. Please don't ever tell the people they don't need title insurance, that a title search was done. If they're going to make the option they don't want owner's title insurance, let them make that decision without your input, okay? Depending on the particular circumstances of the transaction, such insurance could include affirmative coverage against possible mechanics and material men's liens for labor and materials performed prior to settlement, and which, though not recorded at the time of recordation of the buyer's deed, could be subsequently recorded and would adversely affect the buyer's title to the property. So it runs with the title to the property, does not run with the party that caused the problem. Now you could probably go back under paragraph 38 and sue someone for this, but it's better just to get the insurance up front, let the title company worry about it. But you have to have the Eagle title policy. The coverage afforded by such title insurance would be governed by the terms and conditions thereof, and the premium for obtaining such title insurance coverage will be determined by its coverage. Buyer may purchase title insurance at either standard or enhanced coverage rates. For purposes of owner's policy, premium rate disclosure by buyer's lenders, if any buyer and seller requires that the enhanced rates be quoted by the buyer's lenders. So the quote that you're going to get on the closing disclosure from the lender, okay, will be the enhanced, right? They could go back to the standard if they want to try to get cheap and save a little money, but it doesn't save that much money. Buyer understands that nothing herein obligates buyer to obtain any titles insurance coverage at any time, including its settlement, and that the availability of enhanced coverage is subject to underwriting criteria of the title insurer. So I got an email the other day. You might remember when we were talking about the parking spaces under things that convey, and we talked about parking spaces can be a limited limited element, and the seller can't sell it. And we had that situation, and there was an error in title, etc. But the enhanced policy would not cover it, and the agents did not understand why. And the reason being, it pretty much only covers if someone else has an interest in your title, someone else has easement on your land, and properly executed or delivered recorded documents, forgery, etc. So since that could not be sold, it's a limited common element, could not be sold by the parties occupying the property, the insurance doesn't cover it. So they'd have to go back and sue and do all kinds of stuff. Their buyer doesn't want to do it, but they're all upset because they didn't take out the enhanced insurance policy. So the enhanced covers all types of things like unrecorded easements, reversion of forfeiture. You can talk to your title company and find out exactly what it covers, but it's not that much more expensive. I, whenever I buy anything, I get the enhanced policy. Okay? So remember, these paragraphs don't always stand alone in our sales contract. And that's the reason I'm pointing out paragraph 29 there for you. We will take a look at that one in a future session. Any questions about mechanics lien? If you have any questions about what we're talking about, unmute yourself and we'll discuss it. If you have questions about anything else, we're going to hold it to the end when I finish going through the contract. Okay, somebody have a question?
So Larry, 90 days means if work has been performed within 90 days, or once 90 days expire, they lose the...
They have 90 days from the time that they did the work or delivered the materials. So it'd be basically the 90 days plus the rest of the month they filed before settlement. Okay. So what if they did it? What if they did the work 7 days before settlement? Okay. Well, then the 7 days till settlement plus 83 plus the rest of the month afterwards, and then 6 months after that. So you can pretty much figure to be a year to be out, to make sure that no one filed a lien against you.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime there's major work done to a property and contractors did it, the law allows them that luxury of making sure they get paid. Okay. Did that clarify it?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So basically within a year, anything has come up, even it's 90.
Yeah, well, it says 90 days from the day they did the work. So if it was done in the last week prior to the settlement and they didn't get paid, even though the seller said they did, okay, then you have that 7 days, then that would leave 83 for the 90. Plus, if it was done towards the first of the month, you'd have the rest of that month. So, and then they have, after they file the lien, they have 6 months to what we call perfected, go to court and start the lawsuit. So, if you get, a year past settlement, you're pretty, there's not going to be one of these actions taken because it's outside the statute.
So what is the best way to avoid this? We should ask the seller that they should provide all the receipt that they have paid the contractor?
Well, they have to provide the receipts of anything that was part of the home inspection addendum.
Mm-hmm.
But, you would pretty much have to request anything else. So if I said I replaced the roof on my house, well, how long ago did you do that before you put it on the market? So if you put it on the market 1 week after you replace the roof, okay, and it goes under contract that day, so that's 8 days, and we go to settlement in 30, that's only 38 days. There's still 52 days there that the purchaser, or 42 days, whatever the purchaser could, that person that did the work could still put a lien. So anytime it looks like a lot of work's been done, you want it. They generally ask for it at settlement, have something signed, but that doesn't mean a seller wouldn't lie. Okay.
Okay.
It doesn't happen that often. But for the little bit of additional insurance for what we call the Eagle title policy, it's well worth it. So just ask at settlement. I would ask the question at settlement, does this title insurance cover any mechanics liens that might pop up in the future, or just ask in advance of settlement, okay? Just protect yourself. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions about paragraph 21? Okay, let's take a look at paragraph 22. Possession date. Unless otherwise agreed to in writing between seller and buyer, seller will give possession of the property at settlement, including delivery of keys, key fobs, codes, digital keys, if any. Now that seems like that's common sense, right? Why do we have that? Why do we have that in our contract? Well, we had something called the Wet Settlement Act. It's now called RESA, Real Estate Settlement Agents Act. But if you've ever read that act, it says that the keys in possession will be delivered after recording. Okay, after recording. So if you settled on a Friday at 4 o'clock and this thing cannot be recorded until Monday morning, then your buyer wasn't going to get the keys and they couldn't move in until Monday when the thing was recorded. So they changed quite a few years ago. They changed the act to say, unless the contract says something different. So if this clause was not in here, then and this used to happen out in Culpeper quite a bit, they would not turn the keys over or possession until it had been recorded, and that might be 2 or 3 days. Builders sometimes would not turn over the keys until recording, okay? And part of the reason was, until it's recorded, another lien could pop up on the property, okay, between settlement and recording. So maybe even one of these mechanics liens that would cloud the title and they wouldn't be able to get it to the settlement. So our contract calls for this to happen at the table. The keys will be transferred. If that's not the intent of the parties, then you would have to pull this clause and change it to where the keys would not be delivered until settlement. Okay. So including keys, key fobs, codes, digital keys, if any. And if there's no keys, then you don't get any. This was one of my favorite things that I saw at settlement for years. And it used to make me laugh every time I'd leave settlement, because we'd hear this question from the buyer's agent: are these all the keys? Probably not. I mean, there's probably other keys that were made and we don't have them with us. So look, anytime anybody buys a house, they should never move in and not change the locks. How many keys do you need? I need one to each thing, because as soon as I move in, I'm having the locksmith come over and change my locks. Okay. Why would you? And I'm dumbfounded by how many people move into a property and do not change their locks. Now, I own a really old home down in Mineral, Virginia. I don't know if you know what a skeleton key is, but when at settlement, I was given a skeleton key, okay, to my house. Of course, first thing I did was change locks. I still wanted the skeleton key thing there, so because it's sort of cool to have an old house and you have one of those old skeleton keys. But make sure your buyer, first thing you do is change the keys. You want to give the buyer a really good settlement gift rather than something they feel obligated to keep. Hire some handy Andy guy or lady, a service person, to come out, and you pay for the first 2 hours of work, and they'll change locks, they'll change filters, whatever they want. And then anything after that, let the the seller be responsible. You probably can find a person that would be willing to give you a pretty good price for the first 2 hours, hoping to get other work from the new buyer. So but the keys, come on. I had a 1-bedroom condo that my buyer purchased in Arlington, in Clarendon, and the seller came with a jailer's key ring. It had like 30 keys on it for a 1-bedroom condo. And he had it as a rental property for years. And he said, I think these are all the keys, but I'm not sure. Okay. First thing we did was change the locks. Okay. Now, if seller fails to do so and occupies property, they fail to give possession at settlement. Beyond settlement, seller will be a tenant at sufferance of buyer and hereby expressly waives all notice to quit as provided by law. So they're not protected as a tenant now because they're a holdover. Okay. That's just like if I hold over my lease and they go month to month in my mind, but the landlord didn't give me that permission. It changes the way that we go about evicting someone. But you would literally have to evict them right now. To try to do an eviction, even for a holdover seller, would be very difficult in our courts. Okay, so if they don't move out, you can't change locks. You can't do any kind of that stuff as long as they're still in the property, even though you settled. So hopefully they're out before settlement, right? But you wouldn't have to provide the notice to quit. Most leases say you have to give 60-day notice to landlord that I'm not intending to extend the lease, or the buyer, I'm not planning on staying. So a lot of that stuff is waived. At this point, they would need to talk to an attorney if there's a holdover seller. Buyer will have the right to proceed by any legal means available to obtain possession of property. Seller will pay any damages and costs incurred by the buyers, including reasonable attorney fees. That's also included in paragraph 26, that if there's a breach of the contract, the party has to get an attorney. All their fees are covered if they win the case, which in that case they would. So any questions about paragraph 22, possession? Okay. Then let's take a look at paragraph 23. Fees. Fees for the preparation of the deed, that portion of the settlement agent's fee billed to seller, cost of releasing existing encumbrances, seller's legal fees, and any other proper charges assessed to the seller will be paid by the seller. In the state of Virginia, in Northern Virginia, how much would the seller's closing costs be approximately, not counting the commission or any concessions they make? I use 2.25%. I don't know what you guys use. You can do a net sheet. Okay. I just use 2.25. It's about 1.25 plus the in Northern Virginia, the grantor's tax and regional congestion relief fee, plus the commission. But that gives me a pretty rough idea. Okay. Fees for the title exam, except as otherwise provided, survey, recording, including those for any purchase money trust, and that portion of the settlement agent's fee billed to the buyer, buyer's legal fees, and any other proper charges assessed to the buyer will be paid by the buyer. What figure are you guys using for that? I use about 3%, just to give a rough idea. So 3% of the sales price. So when we're asking for a closing cost credit for the seller, from the seller for the buyer, to get more than 3% probably is not a good idea unless you check with your lender, especially depending on the loan product, because 5 or 10% down conventionals and FHA will probably limit it to a maximum amount of not to exceed 3%. But the actual figure in Virginia is usually about 2.88. Remember that closing cost is defined, paid on behalf of the buyer is defined in paragraph 31, and it explains what it is, and it tells everyone, if you don't use it all up, it goes back to the seller. So don't ask for more than you can use, or make sure your lender can use it all that you get. All right. Fees to be charged shall be reasonable and customary for the jurisdiction in which the property is located. If you've ever been involved in a short sale, if you list a short sale, you have to provide to the lender who's holding the mortgage that's being short sold an ALTA that shows reasonable and customary fees, and then they add their fees to come up with whether or not they will accept an offer they receive. So reasonable and customary for the jurisdiction, because most of these mortgage companies are not here in Virginia that are foreclosing. They would not know the customary fees, okay? But customary fees are going to run about 3%. Now, we do have a grantor's tax of 1%, which is part of that 2.25 for the seller, and a regional congestion relief fee, which is the other part of that. If you're in Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun, Prince William, and all cities contained within, my home is in Mineral, Virginia, I would use 1.25 plus the commission and closing costs on behalf of the other party, because we don't have congestion relief there. Now, also remember, this is now a negotiable item. This changed this past year. It can be negotiated that the buyer pay it or that it's split, but you'd have to take this out of this part of the contract. You'd have to cross this out and have it negotiated that they split the fee, etc. I've always wondered why it was not the a buyer's fee anyway, truthfully, because they're the ones that are going to benefit from it. I'm paying tax and I'm moving out of the area. For somebody else to have roads built just never made sense to me, but it is what it is. But it is now a negotiable item. In a competitive market, you're probably not going to have too much negotiating on this part. If a loan is assumed, interest will be adjusted to settlement date, and buyer, oops, I'm wrong. Sorry about that. A buyer shall pay recording charges for the deed and any purchase money trust. And that's all figured in those costs that I threw out. If you have any problem with understanding what the cost would be, there are plenty of title companies and whatever that have examples of what fees would be, etc. Or you can find it in somebody's settlement sheet and take a look at the cost. Okay. Any questions about those fees? Okay. Well, let's talk about the broker's fee. Paragraph 24. Seller irrevocably instructs settlement agent to pay broker compensation at settlement as set forth in the listing agreement, and to disperse the compensation offered by listing brokerage to cooperating brokerage in writing as of the date of offer, and the remaining amount of the broker's compensation to the listing brokerage. Remember, we have definitions in this sales contract. This one calls for date of offer. If you remember from a previous session, if you go to page 1 of your sales contract, okay, the first blank says is offered on, date of offer, quotation marks, okay, which means that set that definition. So whatever's in that first blank is date of offer, whatever commission was offered that day, okay, not something that's changed later. And 3-2 of our Code of Ethics states that a listing agent cannot unilaterally change the offer of compensation after offer date. Okay, they can't come back and say, well, we're getting less, so you have to take less. That has to be a negotiated between broker and broker. Okay, so it doesn't matter what seller and buyer agree to. They can sign something that says the agent's commission is reduced to. That makes no difference. That's something they've agreed to. So if that's what they agreed to, the listing agent already has a listing agreement signed. The buyer and seller can't override that by agreement, so that listing agent is still entitled to their money. The buyer has a signed agreement for buyer's representation with their agent saying they're going to get paid this amount of money. And if not enough comes in to cover it, then they owe the difference. So when a buyer agrees with a seller to reduce commission, then the buyer saying, okay, I understand, and I'm going to have to pay the difference. Okay. So otherwise, they could just get together and sign an agreement that, hey, we don't want to pay anybody anything. And since we agreed to it, they have to abide by it. Now, the contract is between buyer and seller. We're not parties to it. So no matter what they agree to, if we want to stick to our guns per our written agreements, we are entitled to do it because the contract says irrevocably instructs settlement agent to pay that compensation as set forth in the listing agreement as of date of offer, not date of ratification, date of offer. Okay?
Larry, question.
Okay?
I'm sorry for that. Okay, on that compensation, if in the Bright MLS, it says like 3% of base, and then there is a compensation remarks that says variable commission in effect. And
Okay.
then what does it mean?
Okay. Variable commission means that if I go out to list a property, okay, so I'm going to be the listing agent.
Okay.
And I tell you that it's going to be X% compensation, the total of X%. And I'm not going to use numbers because we might have somebody from another firm view this. So just bear with me, X% total, right? Now,
okay.
And I'm going to offer in the multiple listing, I'm going to offer Y to the co-op broker and I'll keep Y. So that's 50-50, right?
Okay.
However, seller, if I sell it myself, the listing agent, or another agent in our firm sells it, okay, we'll do it for W. And if you subtract W from X, it's 1%. So variable means I've agreed with the owner up front. If I sell it or any other agent in my firm sells it, you'll pay less total compensation. It doesn't mean that your commission will be less as the buyer's agent. The listing agent is taking less total. Did you follow that?
Okay. So, but how would I know that that is their agreement? Because this is what it shows on the Bright.
So here's what our code of ethics says, 3-4 of our code of ethics. If you have a variable commission arrangement with the seller, okay, as the listing agent, you must disclose that to all other agents, okay? And the way we do it is there's a mandatory field in Bright that says variable commission, yes or no. So if you have this agreement with the owner up front, one of my Fairfax Realty agents, right? You have this agreement with the owner up front that it's going to be less if you sell it than if a co-op broker sells it, just total, right?
Okay.
Then you must answer that question yes as variable. Now, 3-4 of our code of ethics also says that buyer agents, you must check every listing. If it says variable commission, okay, you must call the listing agent. You must find out what the variable is. They have to tell you. So let's say that I subtracted W from X and it's 1%, okay? Then they have to tell you 1%. They can't tell you splits or anything else, right? So they tell you 1%. Now you have to tell your buyer client, look, if that listing agent or another agent in their firm writes an offer and it's equal to yours, their offer is going to be 1% better automatically because of this agreement with the owner. Okay, so that gives you a chance to develop a negotiating strategy with your buyer,
okay.
how to overcome that.
Larry, okay. But what if I did not, if I'm the buyer's agent and I did not ask the seller's agent what is this all about, and I just rely on the compensation written on the Bright that says 3% and then remarks is variable commission in effect, and he put yes on dual variable commission on the Bright.
So it does not affect your commission whatsoever. Okay.
Okay. So, but the thing is this. If the title company receives the closing disclosure from the seller and it shows only 2.5 instead of the 3% in Bright, can I run after the 0.5% that is missing based on the MIA?
You could go to arbitration hearing for that. Okay.
But it's not happening yet because closing is in about 2 weeks, and I just got it from the
You
closing
can't,
disclosure.
well, go back to them and say, what's going on here? It says 3% in the system. You guaranteed 3% because you put it into Bright. And when you put it into Bright, you're guaranteeing it. Okay?
Even if he has a remark of variable compensation in effect, even if it's said,
It doesn't matter. Okay? If you can't guarantee the commission, right? Because the buyer has the right to know what the commission is because it's being reimbursed on their behalf towards what they owe you. So this is a matter of making sure that the buyer knows how much commission is involved.
is it me or it should be the broker that should
Broker,
question this one?
broker,
Okay, got you. Thank you.
broker to broker on commissions.
All right, I got you. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Larry?
And it has to be a written agreement between broker and broker because it's not your commission until the broker receives it and broker gives it to you, right? Everybody understands that, right?
Yes.
It's not your commission until it comes into the firm and the firm disperses it.
Okay.
When you have, Larry, when you have an agreement with the owner that's variable, is it a document you have signed?
It's part of your listing agreement. There's a paragraph for that, for what the variable will be, and you spell it out. So it's part of the listing agreement itself.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Any other questions about the broker's fee? You know, I would encourage you to go to Bright MLS, log in, and review their rules and regulations. I'm actually going through them again myself, just to see if there's anything that is different. But read through them. It's pretty interesting when it gets to the commission part, right? Good. So no other questions on broker's fee? And after we finish the contract and the forms, the way we're doing this, the next thing we're going to go through is the listing agreement, same way. Okay. So at least I know with the 30 or 35, 40, whatever people that join me for these sessions, at least I know that you've actually read the whole contract. Okay. Because we're doing it together. And there's a lot of stuff in this boilerplate that come back and haunt people because they never really read it or discussed it with their client.
Larry, do you have a way to determine who has looked at your information on YouTube? Because I know I've talked to 3 agents that I referred if they look at the information on YouTube, and they told me they have enjoyed. They started on the first part about a week ago.
Yeah, no, I can't tell who was there. I think they said they could tell who logged onto these sessions and have their emails, but I don't know. I just see that hundreds of people have gone back, which is good. There's been, some of them have been viewed over 100 times, which is excellent, which shows people are, interested in the subject. So, but I don't know who actually looked at them, but thank you for referring agents to take a look at it, because it makes, it's better to know up front so that there's not a problem that arises rather than trying to solve a problem after it does. So thank you for that. Okay, paragraph 25. Okay, paragraph 25, adjustments. Rents, taxes, water and sewer charges, condo, POA, okay, regular periodic assessments, if any, that's the monthly fee they pay, right? And any other operating charges are to be adjusted to the date of settlement, okay? So the seller is responsible for the day of settlement, right? Taxes, general and special. What's the difference between general and special? General are my property taxes. Sometimes you'll see in the tax record, special assessment. Like, I'll give you an example. When years ago, I bought a house down on 8th Street South in Alcova Heights, old house, needed all kinds of work. I was 21 years old, and I'd got married, and I was tired of living in an apartment after 3 months because I'd never been in an apartment in my life. We bought this old house, and I loved it because there was no curb and gutter. I mean, it was just a beautiful old neighborhood. After several years in there, the county came along and said, we're going to improve your property. We're putting in curb and gutter, and you have to pay for the improvement that we're going to do for you. And I said, I don't want the improvement. So I refused to pay. I had a special tax assessment against my property, which I ended up having to pay when I sold, but I was making my stand. I didn't want it. You're ruining my neighborhood. It's beautiful the way it is. So that was a special tax assessment. Are to be adjusted according to the most recent property tax bills for property issued prior to settlement date, except that recorded assessments for improvements completed prior to settlement, whether assessments have been levied or not, will be paid by the seller or allowance made at settlement. So I actually had to end up paying it because the improvements were done, etc. Now, one of the things that you want to pay special attention to with these condo unit owners associations and POAs, especially in a condo, if there's 8 buildings, I live in building 1, but the roof needs to be replaced on building 7. I'm going to help pay for building 7, okay? So there might be a special assessment. So people really need to look at and read the last 3 minutes of the meetings to see if there's any proposed things in the future, because if they're still getting prices and talking about it, but it's, like replacing all the balconies, but it isn't ruled and assessed prior to settlement, after your buyer moves in, next meeting, this might get approved, and all of a sudden they have this assessment of $10,000, and they're going to spread it out over time, and they're going to call you and say, what in the world is this? Well, I'd have known this, I'd have never bought. And you say, well, did you read your minutes? Well, no, you were supposed to. No, I'm not supposed to. So you might want to peruse them and see if there's anything that's in the horizon as far as, assessments for improvements, etc. Okay. Because they're, if it's not in place at the time of settlement, happens afterwards, the buyer's going to be responsible. Okay. If a loan is assumed, interest will be adjusted to the settlement date, and buyer will reimburse seller for existing escrow accounts, if any. So anytime you have an assumption, and there's going to be a few fees involved with it, but everything will be adjusted, interest and whatever will be adjusted to settlement. But I'm going to have to buy the existing escrow accounts, which could be a pretty good chunk of money if we're getting towards tax time and all this money is in there. I may have to purchase it. So just be aware of these different charges and how they will take place. Any questions about any of this stuff we've done today? Because I don't want to do paragraph 26 until we can combine it with 28. 26 being a breach, 28 being a default in a sales contract. Okay. So at this point, I'll open it up to any other questions anybody might have about anything else. And Nestor, at that point, you can stop recording if it's not about these paragraphs, because I don't want people to get confused.
Mr. Larry, I have a
Yes.
question. I do have these materials to go through. So is there any way so I can get it through my email, or I can download from anywhere else?
What do you want to have sent to you?
Yeah, the materials you are teaching us, I would like to have those materials.
Oh, okay.
To read it.
Yeah, they should be in. They should put them in the email. What I'm using that day. But if you go to NVAR, okay, or I tell you what, which office are you in? Are you here at Tyson's or Herndon or?
In Herndon.
Have Jocelyn shoot you an email with the material. She has it in an email where she can shoot it to you. So
Okay.
I'm using a contracts package that that we sent out one of the first times. It has all the forms in it. Okay, so she can send it to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions about anything? Okay, well then we will not meet Monday because it's Labor Day, but we will meet next Wednesday, and we will be discussing paragraph 26, 27, and 28. Hopefully we can get through all that because breach and default are some heavy subjects. Okay.
Larry, I have one question.
Okay.
I have one question. Yeah. I sold one condo in DC. The owner, the seller, sorry, did not provide the fob and letterbox key. Is it okay?
I don't know what the DC contract says.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Okay.
I'm Virginia. I don't do DC and Maryland anymore at all. So you'd have to see if they have a similar paragraph to this. I think they use the old regional sales contract, and the regional sales contract had this language that said if there's any keys, they would provide them, but if not, no. So I think that regional contract, if that's what they used, has that same language.
Okay. Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, thank you very much for joining me. And I look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday, and have a nice, safe Labor Day weekend. Or go out and sell some real estate and make some money, whatever you plan to do.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. And you too.
Thank you.
You should have a wonderful
you.
Thank
weekend.
you.
Thank you,
Weekend,
Larry.
everybody.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye.
Bye.
See you.
You're welcome.
Thank
Bye.
you, Larry. Thank you. Bye.
Okay. See you guys next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.